All right, good afternoon, everyone. It's already in the middle of March, and I wanted to really touch on a couple of different subjects to help agents really get to improve their efficiency and learning. Jean, you had a great question to me right now, and just want to start with that. And welcome, Michelle, to the training. Glad to have you on Zoom with us. So Jean was asking,
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, great. Jean was asking us, I had a question regarding what is IDX? Where does when we put our listings into the MLS, where does it get advertised to? So let me just show you this thing here called List Hub that you guys see as an icon that probably none of you have ever clicked on. And this tells you where the listings get fed to. And so they want me to input all my information. So List Hub is where it goes. And let me see if I have my access already saved. So to answer Jean's question, when there's an IDX, okay, that means that the MLS is being marketed on all of the websites below, okay? And so we have, C21's a sister company of Coldwell Banker. We have homes.com, Home Finder, Lake Homes, Realty Store, Lake, foreclosure.com. So it starts going in alphabetical order. And these are so many hundreds of websites like, LLCs, this is UI, anyway. So you'll start seeing other sites like Open Next Door. We share it with Point2 Homes and whatnot, okay? So those are the publishers' feeds, and from there, it kind of just gets advertised out. There's available 101 of them, and our company reports and shares it to 101, okay? So when you ask the question on, do I need to do anything with my listings, or what if I don't want, I'm going to take Jean's question a little bit further. What if I do not want to publish my listings on specific areas, or I want to control the Z estimates or all these different things, okay? So if I do that on one of my listings, I'll show you what you can do. So I have a property under contract right now in Alhambra. And if I ever wanted to change some things, there's a thing here called Office MLS. And in Office MLS, there's a section box right here that you guys all read. And by default, it says yes. Do I want the internet to have all of the information displayed about my listing? Okay, so the seller allows us to publish it because obviously the more exposure a listing gives to the public and the more people can see it, write offers, show it, share it to their friends, see it on social media, the more areas that you can see this is how you achieve market value. And do you want the internet to display this address? Go ahead and say yes. If you don't want to display the address, you could actually have it put to no, okay, for this one listing. If you want the internet to hide comments from consumers, sometimes people can go to a site like, whatever, even Coldwell Banker has consumer comments where you could write, oh, beautiful home, or they can say it looks lovely, or you can allow it. Sometimes they will badmouth the property. So if you want to hide comments, you could do that. Do you want a internet not allowed to do automated valuation displays where they use a Zillow algorithm or a Z estimate or a realtor AVM, average valuation model? So if you want to allow valuations to be displayed, click yes or no. And does this seller want to participate in neighborhood market reports such as Cloud CMA? Then you say yes or no. So that's where you can go control some of the internet from the agent side. These are what you have control over. Any questions on that? Okay, so for those of you here, Sylvia, Michelle, Jean, I'd love to take this opportunity to train you here since you're in attendance. Is there anything else I can answer right now? Nothing. Okay. Anything you guys want to, there's nothing you guys want to learn?
And also, Kevin, AVID, is it mandatory have to provide it for all the sales transaction?
No, you don't have to do AVID on vacant land.
But if the land, if the seller requests on that, so we have to provide.
The seller requesting an AVID,
Yeah, crazy. They are crazy. Yeah, the transaction.
I don't think the seller has a duty or can even talk to you as an agent. So I would just ignore it because you should be communicating to the seller.
Okay, yeah, I will call them then. Because the inspection
You shouldn't
report
call the
already-
seller if you're representing a buyer.
I represent the buyer. Yeah,
Yeah, you shouldn't be contacting the seller.
I should or shouldn't.
Should not. You are not
Should not-
allowed
no,
to
I-
talk to the seller directly. You're representing a buyer.
No. I'm talking to the seller's agent.
Okay, then you say listing
the-
broker. Yeah, listing
Yeah.
agent.
Yeah, the listing agent's assistant. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
So they're requesting an AVID on a vacant land,
No, for the condo.
then it's required.
Huh?
It is required.
What you earlier you say no.
You asked me, is a AVID required for every transaction? I said no. For example,
Oh.
vacant land is not required.
Oh,
That's
but
my answer to you.
condo,
It's-
single family house.
That's the
yes.
correct answer. For single family and condo, it
Mhm.
depends is the answer. It depends. It depends if you're using a car contract or if you're using a secondary contract that's created, like, for example, attorney written contracts. So if you're using a car contract, I'm assuming you are, then yes, the AVID is already specified in there that an agent has a duty to do agent visual inspection. So the answer is always depends on what contract you're using.
Okay, if car form must be required, right?
If you're using the RPA, yep.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
for example, I have a sample offer that I've written. So if you want to learn about it, I think that's a
Sure.
good way to, let's go ahead and start talking about where to find it. Okay.
Yeah.
You guys see my screen right now with the contract?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So here you have a contract. That's a car RPA revised December 2021, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So as I've always told every agent, read your contracts and know, I'm sorry, I closed it. Know the ins and outs of every contract. So let me make this bigger,
Great. Thank you.
get into contractual questions that you guys have on this stuff, because I think that's a good thing to talk about. So when you ask about investigations of property, condition stuff, you see 11 paragraph 2, right? So in this section here, the TDS is required, right, by the seller. And seller has to provide all the other disclosures, okay? And an AVID, okay, along with the TDS shall be signed by all previous sections. Okay, so this is built into the statutory disclosures area, which is mandatory when the seller is required to do a TDS. So when you ask, nothing here relieves a buyer's agent, which is you, Nothing here says that you have are relieved from the duty to conduct a reasonably competent and diligent visual inspection of the accessible areas of the property. So this tells me, even if your seller is TDS exempt, they're a REO or a bank or foreclosure home or auction, I don't care what property type it is or who the seller is. The agent, if you're using a car contract, this is single family 1 to 4, the agent has a duty to do an AVID and disclose any material facts affecting the value or desirability of the property. Okay, so that's the answer for you right there.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So any other questions on the contracts since we're already here? I'd like to point out a couple of things on the contracts that I find interesting, especially with the new revisions. So let's go ahead and start talking about that, all right? So this is your summary page in page 1, right? Everyone's kind of used to this new format now. So this is where you put in your deposit. This is where you put the loan amount, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
And so let's talk about various types of differences. Like, for example, if you're going to do an FHA loan, okay, there's 17 days where the buyer is supposed to get a FHA appraisal out and deliver the list of lender required repairs. So that's why if you're doing FHA, order your appraisal early enough, because if the property is not in condition and the appraiser says, I need to make sure that the garage door has a fire retardant material. It has to be fireproof. I need to have the water heater strapped. Oh, this is missing a torn screen on the windows. You're missing a cover plate at 3 outlets and 3 light switches. Those are all required FHA things, GFCI. So you got to deliver this list and your request for repairs to the seller. And when you use the FHA VA amendatory clause addendum, that go ahead and has the ability for the seller to help do these repairs in compliance for FHA loans, because they are tougher and have a better condition move-in ready than a standard conventional financing. People ask, this is where the primary residence is supposed to be checked off. So that's just easy right there. And sometimes FHA, you can ask for seller credits for closing costs, where you check the box right here and say towards FHA closing costs of $10,000 or whatever you want to ask for credits for. Okay, so it's nice and easy to throw in some closing costs. And some people say something like, everyone just looks at the price, right? The seller does not have a trained eye how to read a purchase contract like an agent should. So for example, let's say the asking price is $1,033,000, right? The seller is a price-driven person and say, I will not consider any prices unless it's $1,050,000 or higher. Okay, well, if I'm a buyer agent trying to give the seller what they want, and I want my buyer to get considered and accepted, and I know $1,050,000 is where I need to be, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll write an offer. My buyer says, I really only want to pay $1,033,000. Okay, Kelvin, you're my agent. Help me get this at 1,033. Then I'll say, okay, how about this strategy? There's a gap of 17,000 from 33 to $1,050,000. The seller wants $1,050,000. They're not considering any offers unless you hit $1,050,000. Here's what I'm going to do to represent you, buyer, and negotiate. I'll write $1,050,000 in the offer right here. Okay, let's proceed with that. And since this is your prior residence, I'll check off in here the seller to credit $17,000, okay, to apply towards your closing costs. Okay, great. The seller who reviews these offers, now you're in the in the seller's blessing, because they're reviewing this offer, and there's a chance that the seller might not see this, or the listing agent. I don't know how many listing agents of you explain each offer line by line by line, but some agents won't even explain this right here. So you technically may get a seller accept you with the $17,000 per contract per acceptance that they don't realize mid-escrow. And once they realize it, it's too late. It's in your contract. Okay. So that's a strategy right here for you buyer agents trying to get the seller's price-driven goals, but you can still accomplish $17,000 worth of closing costs. And then there's a few of you who are experienced are going to say, Kelvin, how would they get $17,000 of closing costs? Easy, buy points. Okay, that's the answer. When you have a property, I've seen so many instances of tenant occupied properties, and whether or not, how do you negotiate and get this property to be delivered vacant? Okay, my answer to you guys is by default, it's already delivered vacant in this contract. If you're using a car contract, we're going to go ahead and take a look at certain things. Let's talk about contingencies for you buyer agents out there. This is where you get to waive your loan or appraisal contingency. And if you are going to waive any contingency up front prior to acceptance, then make sure you add form acting against broker advice. Okay. So if they're going to waive their appraisal contingency, okay, go ahead, check the box and advise them this is against broker's advice. It's risky activity, but I understand a lot of people are waiving the appraisal because good thing is you have a little bit higher down payment. In the event this $1,050,000 purchase price appraises for $1 million, I want to make sure you have enough closing costs to fulfill the contract if the lender only gives you 80% of $1 million. Okay, so you can consult them on that, let them know, or if they only have $20,000 above the appraisal that they can pay, then go ahead and write in here, appraisal contingency needs to appraise for $1,030,000 or greater. And that is your key to ensure that if it appraises lower, you can back out. Any questions on that? Okay, this is your due diligence period. And if you want to reduce your due diligence period, 7 days, the home inspection can be performed. It is sufficient and helpful, just so to show and help you if you're doing with a multiple counteroffer situation. Here's a way to show to the other party that you're going to diligently work hard investigating quickly. And so that means you can cancel quickly if you're not happy with the condition. I like to keep 17 days for informational access because this is not a contingency period. It just means I can bring in, and let's say the first 7 days, I bring in my home inspection and they give me the report back in 5 days. I have a condition, I have the defects, but guess what? What if the report says, see a mold specialist, see a roofer, consult with a HVAC person for potential deterioration, see a termite or anything that they ask an electrician. If you reduce your informational access to 7 days, that means you're not allowed to technically bring the roofer or electrician on the 8th day after acceptance. So this is for your informational access and bringing other people to the property. This is where you have extra time, and not as a contingency, but time to access. Maybe it could just be an architect or a contractor or someone that you're going to go ahead and do measurements on. That's great. You want to build measurements, you technically are not allowed after the 17-day period of time. This is where you get to review the seller's document, 17 days, title report, common interests like HOAs, blah, 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 blah. Any questions here? by default in possession M1, it says on the close of escrow, upon notice of recording on the closing date, property shall be delivered vacant 6 p.m. or go ahead and check the box like 1 p.m., 2 p.m. if you want it earlier. So seller occupied units or vacant units, it's going to be delivered close of escrow date. Unless you do 29 days, you can use form SIP where the seller stays behind. And or if it's tenant occupied, this is where you check the box TOPA and ask for the tenant estoppel certificate, copy of the lease agreement, and the buyer's accepting the property delivered vacant right here. Any questions? Please interrupt me because I want this to be useful to you and I want this to be collaborative. So hopefully we can learn together on different things that I see in this contract. So when we deliver documents, seller has 7 days to deliver the documents. And if they are countering you, buyer to remove their inspection contingency within 7 days, if they're going to be tough on you, you can ask for them to deliver the disclosures within 2 days. Okay, you can reduce it. So if you have a quick turnaround period, you can also ask them to be quickly giving you documentation, right? Now, I'd like sellers to pay the HOA fees early. So sometimes I'll reduce that down to 1 or 2 days if there's an HOA. And if I have a 7-day appraisal contingency, I want the seller to do the carbon monoxide smoke detectors. I want them to do it within 5 days sometimes. So you can do stuff like this to ensure your property will pass the appraisal the first time. The other points of interest to talk about here is items included or excluded. Have a discussion if there's anything important, or take photos or videos of the property so that when you talk to the buyer, is there anything that we're including or excluding, or talk to the listing agent specifically if there's anything important to the sellers so they can exclude it here, or if anything important to the buyers, include it here. Like the pool equipment is already built in, but you could talk about things like TVs, you could talk about built-ins, you could talk about other things that are fixtures or not sure if it's a fixture or furniture. So clarify here and check the boxes, spend the time making sure you thoroughly are getting what you are requesting, okay? Now, in this situation, usually a buyer would do the home inspection. Maybe the buyer wants to do a other report, like maybe they have asthma, so they want to send a air quality control person or mold inspector. Maybe they want to hire some other reports like boundary lines or surveys or blah, 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 blah. Okay. So
And
this is where you check termite report.
Yeah.
Okay. The problem with termite, Gene, is I don't want a report because a termite report is free in many different companies. That's not what I want for my buy.
Section 1.
I want Section 1 clearance.
Yeah.
So
you put it on that.
So if you put it here, guess what? It's going to bring you a whole new page at the very end and it looks ugly. It makes it easier for the seller to see that you're requesting for clearance. So I would rather put it in here or I put it in here. Okay. Termite clearance, Section 1, termite clearance, and seller to pay. I like to throw it right here.
Okay. Got it. Yes.
And a home warranty plan, you could throw it in here, pick your selection of your company, and you could throw in any other special terms right here. So for my strategic purposes of representing this buyer, I'm asking for a 60-day closing period because that lender wants 60 days. And if the buyer's lender needs more time, buyer reserves one option to postpone the actual close of escrow date up to 30 days or less as required by lender, as long as the buyer successfully removes the loan contingency. Okay. So I'm buying myself an option to extend upfront. you have a tenant occupied property, check this box. If you're going to throw in any other addendums, go ahead and fill them out in here. And yeah.
Yeah, but what about if we don't know yet, and in the after that we will have addendum, so that will be fine, right?
Well, then these are for addendums that you're attaching with this RPA. If you don't, if you have
I see.
future addendums, there's no way you can attach a future uncertain item now.
Yeah.
So you would throw it in later on and get it executed in order for it to be built into the contract, incorporated.
Okay, good. Okay, sure. Thank you.
Great. I
Yeah.
love the collaboration. Please, Michelle, Gina, welcome. If you guys have any questions, I'm teaching you guys the contracts and disclosures and tidbits about the RPA that many people overlook is today's topic. I've seen so many escrows recently where buyers try to perform the home inspection prior to delivering the EMD funds. You can, as a listing agent, there's some things wrong with this, because sometimes they'll go on day 1 or day 2 of a contract, they'll say, oh, I want to do a home inspection. Yeah, we'll open escrow. Great. We'll send our home inspector tomorrow. And great, you've given them access. You've given them the potential to damage the property without any money secured in escrow. I've had transactions personally where they filled the jacuzzi tub, a hot tub with water. The home inspector left the water running. And guess what happens? There was a leak caused on the first floor. Without any money in escrow, your seller is injured right now. They have they have an insurance claim, they have damages, and there's nothing right now to pursue that buyer, except for this contract, but this contract has no deposit. So I advise, if you're a seller's agent, home inspections will be allowed, or access will be allowed after buyer has delivered their EMD deposit to escrow, confirmed. Boom. You've satisfied and protected your seller this way. But your sellers don't even appreciate what the things you do. But as a broker, I'm just teaching you, there's so much that you need to learn from experience of things that happen. And that's just one instance of a home inspector. Many times they also don't even send a home inspector to the property that's a licensed and bonded insurance person. Some of these buyers get under contract and they go, oh, I'm going to send my contractor out. Okay. And the contractor goes out, and these contractors play their own game. Okay. They'll go into the crawl space. They'll go into the attic. They'll open things up. They could damage properties. They might not have insurance at all. And what else happens is, you know, they'll use that contractor and then not have any official reports. And then they're going to request for $20,000 on day 1 without their deposits into escrow. Okay. So many tactics like these buyers are doing this, taking advantage of listing agents who don't know the game. So I've seen many renegotiation going on very early from investors who are flipping this property or looking to, you know, fix and flip. All right, moving on to other areas. Okay. It's important to understand that if you paragraph 29, liquidated damages, any clause that says that there's a release or forfeiture of a deposit, claiming it's non-refundable, any such clauses shall be deemed invalid by the court. Okay, unless this clause satisfies damages that fall under the category of liquidated damages. And that is basically, if you know paragraph 29, liquidated damages, it means breach of contract, buyer's failure to perform, and various other areas where the seller is injured or loss of time, stuff like that. Okay. After they've removed all contingencies. Okay. So I've seen many buyers switching loans, lenders. Maybe they went from an FHA loan, they switch it to conventional. Maybe they go conventional financing declared and they change it to a portfolio loan. Or maybe they go private financing. It's okay. It's allowed for a buyer to switch lenders, switch the loan amounts. But if you're going to do this stuff, you might have to give an amendment to escrow with the different loan amounts or different parties. If you're going to assign or add a co-borrower. But there are differences that you have to talk about in terms of if it's cash or they change to financing. If it's cash changing to financing, the seller does not have to honor or allow the appraisal. They don't have to do this and this and that. They may allow it. It's subject to negotiation. But I do want to make sure you understand FHA and VA loans tend to have a lot more lender requirements that may need some repairs in escrow. Even if you wrote seller multiple counteroffer, property sold as is, no repairs or credits provided by seller, if this FHA or VA lender asks for it, they may renegotiate with you, even if you said no repairs. Okay, so that's just something you could talk about. I have a question from Michelle asking, is it a good idea to have the seller have home inspection performed on the property first? And as a broker, I'm always going to tell you it depends. Okay, because that's the answer. It really depends. If you have a newer construction building and it's less than 10 years old, I'll say you probably don't need a seller paid home inspection done on the property. No, don't need to. Is it if its property is very clean, maybe it's advisable that the circumstances to the seller is very important. So let's say the seller says, Kelvin, I need to move to Arizona next week. I need this closed quickly. I need a buyer who wants this quickly, and I don't want to play any games. I don't want to waste any time. I'm willing to pay for a home inspector, provide it in the MLS, in the supplements, give it to the buyers up front from a big professional licensed in home inspection company. And I want them to know the condition up front of all the defects of my home. I don't care if it's 50 years old or 100 years old or 10 years old. Here's a reputable home inspection company. Here's a report. Review it up front. I want buyers to remove their home inspection. I want them to remove that home inspection contingency up front. And so that way I could cut to the chase. So my answer to you, Michelle, is yes, do a home inspection report if this is advisable, recommended, and achieves the seller's goals. Okay. If the seller's goals is to get the highest price, most people want to get market price. Okay. Well, if the property is a piece of crap that needs tons of repairs, it's a tear down, I would say don't do a home inspection up front. Let the buyers and the market dictate what is that condition and what is the repairs for. Because every person, buyer, investor, can get their own and know their own pricing for their own repairs better than you. So they could probably get better pricing and let the market dictate what is this property worth. But if it's a relatively newer, good shape, good maintained home, you can go ahead and advise them, yeah, let's go ahead and do the home inspection. Your home looks great. The worst thing I can find on this property, and I have a trained eye, you just have some cracks here. You have a couple of defects there. You have some wiring issues that a GFCI, this is not, to me, it looks like you have only maybe 5 minor things that could show up on a report. Let's go ahead and do a home inspection, share it in the supplements page, counter offer, multiple counter offers to all the buyers, give them this report and ask them for their best and final. And because you have a clean, relatively clean report provided, I think the buyers will feel comfortable giving you their best and final terms when we multiple counter offer them. That's a great idea. So Michelle, I hope that answers your question. Any other questions that are related to this? Or anything unrelated to this? There is a limit on credits to buyer. So if you have a $1 million home, your closing costs, let's say for a buyer, it's going to be $10,000 when you add title, escrow, lender fees, and whatever extra that you're negotiating out. Okay, so if your buyer's asking for the seller to credit $60,000 from the roof that needs repairs, okay, or replacement, any repairs above the lender's limits technically do not have to be given by the seller. Okay, so if you're going to get a significant credit from the seller, $60,000, you got to talk to your lender. What is the maximum allowable credit? So read this paragraph, talk to the lender, find out what that is, because I can tell you $60,000 might be too much. And there's only so many points that you can buy, okay? So instead, my suggestion is find out what the max credits are. You could use, let's say it's $10,000. Okay, great. Get $10,000, and there's $50,000 that you need to find out or work out. Then just use that as a price reduction. Okay, that's the solution. The situation I'm finding a lot of times is verification of down payment and closing costs, verification of loan applications. So it is always a good idea as a listing broker to vet, call, speak to the lenders to see if they truly have worked on this file. I like to call and ask the lenders before committing and executing a contract, what is the type of financing lender? Can you tell me now, this borrower that you're working with, have you received all documentation, the credit report, FICO scores, the tax returns, the state, all the W-2s or 1099? Okay, great. And sometimes I can try to ask these questions. Is this a W-2 earner or 1099? Is this borrower intend to add any other parties to the transaction? Are they fully qualified based on their current income? And then lastly, my advice to you listing brokers is to ask this one question. Lender, thank you for answering my questions. I'm glad to hear that you do have the documents that your buyer said that you've given. What are the remaining conditions or potential issues for financing with this borrower in this transaction? What do you foresee could be the potential issues? And they're just gonna say, oh, just make sure the condition's good. Oh, make sure it appraises for this value. Okay, great. That's normal. Now you can see this and this and that. But ultimately, sometimes they'll open up certain things. Well, this borrower actually owns a business, and so I'm not sure if they haven't received their business tax returns. Okay, boom, that could be a red flag. I want to know if this is a profitable business. If it's negative business, it could be an issue in your loan. This borrower, yeah, their income is this, but their ratios are 47%. Ooh, that's a trigger. Their DTI LTV ratios is above 45%. That tells me they're marginal, or they need to make sure that they pay off certain expenses, or maybe if they pay off the rest of their lease payments, well, blah, 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 blah. So if their DTI or loan to value ratios are greater than 45%, that is when I get concerned that they're working on very thin margins. But if they have higher down payment or they have stronger reserves, then I'm okay. All right. Third question. Let's say it's a FHA borrower at 3.5% down, and that's really all they have. Maybe it's a 20% down payment borrower, and Once you go below 20%, you might have PMI built into the financing. Okay. So there are borrowers, let's say it's $1 million home, guys. They need $200,000 down payment plus closing costs, correct? So let's say the closing cost is around $10,000 normally today. They can do an estimated closing cost for a borrower based on the escrow fees, title fees, and the lender's fees, and it comes out to $10,000, right? So they got to come up, and their down payment for their home is $200,000 total. That includes the EMD, guys. $10,000 of that additional for closing costs, and then the lender needs an additional 2 months of reserves. So that means they need to show in the bank $219,000 worth of savings in their account reflected today. You guys are you on the same page with me? $219,000 they show to me, and they show me $220,000. Great, they're qualified, they're pre-approved, they can close this loan, they're perfect, they have 20% down, it's all ready to go as of today. Here's the issue I'm going to talk to you about, okay? If you're a listing broker, you're looking at this and saying, yeah, everything on paper looks fine. Do you know what happens tomorrow? The Fed is actually meeting, and the Federal Reserve is going to giving a statement to the public regarding what's going on with the forecast, their predictions on inflation, their measurements and CPI indexes, and they're basically bringing together another quarterly report to all of us nationally. Internationally is following this news tomorrow. So let's say tomorrow they go, oh, with the war in Ukraine and this going on, inflation is actually closer above 8% CPI index, blah, 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 blah. We are going to be raising the 10-year treasury yield bonds an additional 0.5%. 0.5% rate hike, that's going to go send across the world to all the national lenders out there. Let's go ahead and raise our interest rates another 0.5% too. And when that happens, because the borrower typically does not rate lock on day one of opening escrow, they rate lock, 3 weeks, 2 weeks in after they've been vetted. So what happens? This same borrower with $220,000 worth of reserves, can I have you mute yourself if you're gonna go ahead and talk on the phone? Thank you. All right. So, Jean, can you mute yourself?
Oh, sorry.
All right. Now, this same borrower who was fully qualified at day 0, day 1, when you accepted them, now all of a sudden, when they have to increase the rate of 0.5%, and they thought they were getting 4%, now they're getting 4.5, 4.6% on their financing. Now their monthly payment is higher, right? Now their ratios are impacted because now they need larger 2 months reserves, okay? And so now this very marginal borrower might not get this loan approved just simply because the rate of lock, the rates have increased. Okay, it is possible they bring it up another 0.5 point in this next month. In my suspicion, I believe they're going to keep it very minimal, and it might just only be a 0.25% rate hike. That's my opinion, but we'll find out tomorrow, guys. Any questions? Now, occupancy. Buyer intends to occupy as indicated in paragraph 3E3. I already showed that to you. Where they declared this is supposed to be a primary residence, and occupancy does impact available financing. The key thing here, borrowers don't understand this. If they occupy as a primary residence, they get favorable terms. If they do this as an investment property, it's going to be another 0.5% higher, rougher, give or take, depending on the lender. Okay, So you get higher rates when it's an investor. So that could be a differences. But then Kelvin, look, the Bank of America says they're giving out home mortgages at 4.1%. You know, I want 4.1. And then I go, that's for primary residence. Ask the Bank of America rep. Okay, if it's investment property, what's the rate? And then it comes back to me. So make sure you have your clients read this contract. If you're really dealing with a buyer, I don't even show them properties. I tell them, read the contract first. I'll fill this out for a sample one that you wanted to see. So I want you to read this contract, have time to understand it, because I don't want to be answering all these weird questions that you might have while we're trying to get this signed and sent to the by the deadline to the listing agent. Read it now, please, buyer. And I put that in writing. I don't have a verbal conversation. I tell the buyer in email, read this contract now. We need to be able to be ready to go in the seller's market to deliver an offer by a deadline of 3 days. A lot of times you don't have time to read the offer then. Here's a standard contract, standard terms that I would normally write up for you in your protection. Please use this time while we're searching for homes to let me know any paragraphs or any sections of this to let me explain it to you in writing. Okay. There are many times where I've seen that the condition of property it needs to be the same as the date of acceptance condition. So technically speaking, I've already had it where the seller allowed and stopped paying for the gardener. They stopped paying for the pool man. And all of a sudden, by the time we close escrow, the pool is green, the weeds have overgrown, and it looks like a piece of crap. So when I do my final walkthrough, I would tell the landlord or the seller, it looks like you didn't maintain the landscaping, the grounds, the pool man, the this and this and this. We're gonna hold our close of escrow. We want you to turn the pool back blue, and we want you to get it back as of the condition of the property. Here's the photos that we have on the date of acceptance. Okay. And they have a duty to maintain the property in the same way. And that's minor. Those are easily done, cutting and gardener. But what happens if they have damages to the property? The question is to all of you now, and this is where I want you to please communicate and participate. What happens? The seller moved out and the furniture moving company damaged some walls. There's some damages, scratches to the flooring. I see a few more cracked tiles. I have loose baseboards or loose areas on the handrails. I have marks all over the paint. What steps do you take if you're representing this buyer and you're conducting this at the final walkthrough? What do you do? Who can volunteer, please? Okay. Nobody knows what to do.
What is the question again? Sorry, Kelvin.
You're representing a buyer. On the final walkthrough date, you notice that the furniture moving company or the seller has lots of damages to the property. The flooring is scratched, the walls and paint is chipped in multiple areas. The stairway is damaged, the handrail is loose. You have chipped areas and cracked tiles. What do you do when you see this happen at the final walkthrough when you're representing a buyer 5 days prior to close of escrow? Anybody?
Kelvin, you inform the seller immediately. You inform the listing agent immediately.
Okay, so your answer is you call the listing agent immediately and maybe you snap some photos?
Absolutely documented on a form of an email as well.
Okay, thank you for saving it, because a call is, to me, the second after you do the documentation and the email in writing first. Because you want to have a timeline, and in case there's a dispute, you want to have a great diary log of what happened, incidents that occurred. So Sylvia is correct. What I would do is first take a picture of all the areas that we noticed with me and the buyer walking through the property doing our final walkthrough. Then snap the photos, send it to the listing broker agent email and say, dear listing agent, during our final walkthrough today from 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock, here are a bunch of the photos that my buyer and I took regarding the condition of property. And we noticed these 8 things, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, see photos attached. And this is all new damage. We suspect this is caused when the seller had the furniture moved out. It seems pretty obvious. And the 9th thing that I want to add is it appears that the seller has taken away a built-in fixture, the laundry, washer and dryer that was supposed to be included, whatever light fixture or blah, 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 blah. Okay. So we would like these returned back to its original condition as per paragraph condition of property. As per paragraph 7B, please advise and consult your seller about returning that item and the defects that are now newfound damages to the property, and let us know when we are ready to reconduct our final walkthrough. Thank you. And then you call them and negotiate and figure things out. Okay?
Sure.
That's what
Kelvin,
you
may
do.
I say something?
Yep.
I think that's a perfect explanation. And yes, that would be like in a situation, in a scenario that you presented. But in the scenario that we had a neighbor knock on our door when we were doing our, actually handing over the key. And the neighbor came over and said, I have photos of the seller bearing gallons of paint in the backyard. So yeah, the reaction to that immediately was to contact the listing agent, which was a little more complicated. She was also the owner and the listing agent, which she never disclosed. So that got remediated, that got taken care of immediately. She forfeited her commission and made sure that everything got cleaned up. But yes, we documented everything, but I guess in some situations we kind of react, but we need to make this phone call immediately because it's like, oh, oh shoot, now what?
Well, you're telling me this, and I breaking this down as a broker, this is called home ownership now. If you're delivering possession and keys,
Right.
that means the escrow is already officially closed.
Right.
And now this is a
Right.
buyer who's talking to neighbors and hearsay, whether it's fact or fiction or with there's photos, fantastic. Buyer is now a homeowner now. This owner is gathering evidence and information, intellectual information regarding some potential misrepresentations and failure to disclose and hazardous items being dumped on property after close of escrow. This is now a civil issue between us, the owner, and the previous owner. It technically has nothing to do with the listing broker too, if the listing broker had no knowledge of this.
In this situation, oh, right, the listing
If the listing
broker,
broker is the
right.
fixer, flipper, and they're the owner of the property, yeah, they're tied in. That's why they gave up the commission. So if you're dealing with a part owner investor who is representing themselves, that's why there's a lot of liability when you're flipping your own property. Sometimes you don't list your own property, okay? Just because you have a license doesn't mean you should use it some certain instances. Because you won't get E&O insurance coverage on this kind of coverage when you're doing illegal hazardous activity. You're not holding yourself to a professional standard. So sometimes you shouldn't do E&O. There are a lot of different things for fixer or flippers that they should talk to their attorneys about. But that's something that's important for you guys to know, because that's probably why this agent is giving up and volunteering their commission. All right. Good points.
Thank you.
Any other questions, points related near this on the contracts? All right.
So Kelvin, mentioned about earlier, the thing we need to use the addendum to write up all these things and take the picture and email to the listing agent, right?
No,
Is it use the
you
addendum?
don't
What
need
kind
to
of the
use an
form?
addendum. You need to use, if you're using a car contract, assuming it is, the vinyl walkthrough, VP form. And if there's 16 lines on there and you can't fit it all, then you use an addendum optionally.
I see. Got it. Okay, sure.
You can also write it in a Word document. You can write it in a letter. So the VP, and you can just write it in a letter, or you can have it in an attorney letter. It does not have to be on an addendum either, because an addendum requires 2 signatures to be executed. And so that's why the addendum is not the appropriate area.
I see. Okay, though. Thank you.
All right. Good questions. Now, contingencies and removal of contingencies. Oh my God, we're going to do another one of this. I know already that one of our agents, their client removed all contingencies during the offer phase up front prior to execution. And then the seller goes, then the buyer says, hey, I love this property. I'm an experienced investor. I know how to do ADUs. I know how to do improvements. I got great rates. I just love this property. I'm buying this no matter what. I'm buying it with cash. And me and my partner, my buddy, we love it. We're going to remove all contingencies. Here's our contingency removal of all contingencies up front. Great. Awesome. No subject to loan appraisal. We don't need a loan contingency. This and this and that. All right, perfect. This applies to those of you who want this kind of buyer who's so confident in their purchase. Then something happens. Okay. Luckily, my well-trained agent has several forms and things in writing advising against this risky activity, acting against broker advice, that this is a fully non-contingent purchase and they're confident in this, and blah, and buyer's an experienced investor. So they have all of this documentation for me to review as a broker. Great. I feel more comfortable now that we've done our duties. Okay. We could still get sued, but we have our evidence and our bulletproof and our shields here in case we ever need to pick up our shields. Now, what happened to this buyer? Well, this buyer and their partner consulted with the city, got their architect involved, and found out that the guest house ADU is not the size or the what they had in mind, what they thought they could build. They were able to get an ADU, but it wasn't as big as they wanted it, or being able to get a second guest house, a third ADU. Okay, so they were hoping for it, but at the same time they were only getting able to get one, and they were, so anyways, so after the review, they changed their mind. They had a dispute between partner and partner. One partner says they want to go forward. One partner says they want to cancel. And guess what happens? Okay. Their deposit is already in escrow, and they have signed off on liquidated damages. They have initialed on mediation arbitration. So guess what happens? Okay. Property is ready to close. Seller says, hey, we signed our grant deeds. We're ready to close anytime you guys are. What's going on, buyer? And then the agent communicates to them about what's going on and then dispute. And now they're asking for this and this and that. They're asking for more than the security, the earnest money deposit. The seller had made some expenses and incurred some losses in order to deliver this property vacant to the buyer. And now what's at risk, guys? Okay. Well, to be a long story short, as a buyer's broker, I tell the buyer, you're a breach of contract. You've removed all contingencies. You have a duty to close. You don't have anything protecting you. So, okay, I mean, your deposit is fully at risk. Read this area here. Read paragraph 8. And let's go ahead and read read paragraph H and I. Let's read this, guys. Let's read this together. Removal of waiver of contingencies with their offer. Buyer has no obligation to remove a contractual contingency. Okay, if buyer does remove a contingency without receiving all required information from seller, okay, let's talk about what's required. TDS, SPQ, disclosures, title report, NHD report. So many of these buyers are removing it and they don't have all these information in the supplements page. Buyer is relinquishing any contractual rights that apply to this contingency. If buyer removes and waives this contingency without any adequate understanding, buyer is acting against the advice of agent and broker. Please, and I would say see attached ABA form, acting against broker advice. So if buyer removes all contingencies or partially removes some contingencies up front, okay, this is what's going to happen. Seller, if buyer, in bold letters here, buyer normally will have, let's say, 17 days inspection period and a 17-day loan appraisal contingency period. So anyway, this is where you get to talk about buyer must remove it in writing by 17 days. Remove the contingency or cancel, okay? And they're protected during this contingency period. If the seller delivers anything late, you get 5 days after receipt of anything late to review, even if you've already removed your home inspection contingency. So what is often delivered late? A termite report sometimes delivered late. HOA documentation, financials, meeting minutes, and the health of questionnaire of the HOA, that's often delivered late. So these are areas where you can buy yourself additional time or use as an ability to excuse and cancel based on late delivery review documentation. Okay. This is definitions of
Kelvin,
what's fixtures.
Kelvin,
Yes, Jean.
I want to share about something about current my transaction. Most
Okay.
of the condo they will request the HOA provide the documents, right? Some of the agent they just give you the CC to remove all contingency, but the budget from the HOA still haven't delivered to the buyer yet. So be keep in mind. So make sure like you receive the budget and statement or the project, like do they have any pending on the project, and then before you remove the contingency. Sometimes the listing agent just push you to remove the contingency. They don't care what you receive the document have for the buyer. Yeah.
Okay, just imagine this is contingency removal number 1. Okay. So the seller says, remove all your contingencies, 17 days are here. Your time is up per multiple counter offer. You're removing all your contingencies by 17 days. Jean is saying, I haven't got the HOA docs. Okay, package. Okay, great. So my answer to you is, well, the buyer should remove some contingencies. There are certain things that the buyer can remove. So in this situation, the seller already fulfilled their NHD, they fulfilled the title, they fulfilled the disclosures, and the buyer's already completed their home inspection. So in that instance, I would probably just say buyer removes only the individually, or I would say I would pick over here except. So I will go ahead and say, well, I remove, yeah, my loan is 21 days, so I'm not removing my loan. I'll remove the appraisal because that's done. I'll remove my inspection. I'll remove my investigation contingency and review of the seller's disclosures here and paragraph D, right? I reviewed the title report, that's in. And so the only remaining thing is what you're talking about is called the HOA disclosures or common interest disclosures. I'm sorry. And that's pretty much it, you're saying. So in that instance, you go ahead and just remove the checked boxes that you provided to them of what you can remove. If I'm really only waiting for the HOA, it's probably easier to remove everything, all contingencies removed, except the condominium plan HOA. I check that box, and I also check other and say buyer and buyer's lender still has not received the HOA disclosures and the HOA questionnaire package. Seller was supposed to deliver this on, let me go back to the offer again. Going back to the offer, seller in this situation has 7 days to, let me go where it is. Continue seller. This agreement is required that the buyer has rights to look at common interest HOA disclosures required by Civil Code of California 4525 and under paragraph 11K. Now, the seller was supposed to provide it in 7 days. Let me show you where it is. Right here. So this is where they provide the SPQ and TDS, and they got to pay all the fees for the HOA and blah, 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 blah. Seller has a, and blah, blah, blah. So this is paragraph 9K. Let me see what this says. 11K. And then when you go back up here, I already advised you up front. I told you in the beginning. That the buyer already has built in here 5 days after receipt of any HOA docs, they get this contingency period, and it's a California Civil Code, so they can't override this. Okay, you get 5 days. So when I told you seller delivery of documents and time to pay ordering HOA documents, they were supposed to give 7 days to deliver the disclosures and all the other stuff. It's actually, they had 3 days to order the HOA docs, right? So if this seller says, listing agent, you had 3 days, paragraph N3 says, did you order the HOA in 3 days? Because if you didn't, if you did, show me the evidence when you sent the email and the timestamp. And if they delayed this, well, it doesn't matter when they delayed, but let's say they ordered it on the 7th day, a week later. Well, then, you know, you've caused me to have a delay. I can't remove this contingency. So we're removing what we can, and we're holding the HOA review. It's a seller duty to prepare it, okay? And the seller is going to pay for it. So that's where I asked for that the timestamp to show and prove to me that they ordered it. And they're going to say, Kelvin, this is a weakly managed, a poorly managed HOA. I think I can't get a hold of anyone. No one's answering. This management company refuses to do it because of this, or whatever. I don't care. They're going to give you some reasons or excuses, and that is not your buyer's fault. So you go ahead and build in yourself due to, and I would do the a letterhead and say, due to, here is the contingency removal attached for what buyer could feasibly accomplish during what has been provided for the seller. Buyer removes all contingencies except the review of the HOA disclosures. And due to the delay, whenever we receive it, we shall request additional 4 days of our loan contingency so that our lender can review these HOA questionnaire certificate and all of the financials and health, because this is causing us delays on our end. And we shall not be penalized the close of escrow date either. So we should also get granted an extra 7 days of close of escrow period, grace period, in the event this escrow is delayed. Get that signed, executed, and noticed, and negotiate that out with the other party. Any questions? Does that answer your question, Jean?
So far, no, thank you.
Okay, so again, we're talking about the removal of contingencies and waivers, and go ahead, remove your contingencies and make sure you keep what you need to preserve, especially if there's a lack of duty performed on the seller side. Okay, let them notice them. You actually should be sending a notice to perform to seller with your contingency removal, with that letter asking for more grace period time. That's called extension of time addendum, to give you more time for your contingency period and more time for your closing period. So throw all of that together and a notice to seller perform to deliver the HOA certificate and documents requested as per contract per paragraph, what I just showed you right now. Okay. So point of sale requirements. This is such a headache on certain cities that have point of sale requirements, such as San Marino or Azusa or El Monte. Pasadena has some limitations. So go ahead and just, and LA. So City of LA, make sure you go ahead and notice something cool here, how they changed the contract, guys. They used to just have it in kind of a checkbox area, who pays for what. And now it's a little bit improved, that government point of sale inspection reports is separated. 10A, 10B, seller shall pay for the, for example, City of El Monte pre-sale inspection report. Okay. Here is where you say who pays for any potential corrective items that needs to be corrected or violations. So this is checked off who pays. It could be both pay. It could be negotiated. It could be buyer pays and they do what's called a temporary clearance certificate and the buyer posts a bond. Okay, that if that's the case, because you're not going to be able to get the clearance or you can't work on the property because it needs a permit and the seller doesn't want to do it. They say, I want to sell it as is. I don't want to do it. Then you can have your buyer pay for it and they get the bond posted later on. Seller just pays for the report. You could do that. Okay. So I like how they clarified these two sections here. It's easier to read, negotiate, and add some language in here. The common issue I see is point of sale inspection report says covered patio is not permitted to tear it down. Sometimes the buyer says, okay, that covered patio is a value, I want it. So maybe the buyer says, I'll go ahead and I'll tear it down and I'll keep the wood, put it back up later on. Okay, there's things that happen all the time, but you might,
Unknown caller.
I'm gonna have to mute somebody. Okay, whoever it is. Okay, anyway, that's it for that part. Any questions? Notice here in, we're talking about the statutory rights and disclosures. That's all here. This is important. You guys read all of this because that's important. This is where it says that AVID is required and nothing, and agents have a duty to disclose any material facts, value that affect the value or desirability about the property. So go ahead and throw that in there. And this is the new home fire hardening disclosure advisory, where if you need a TDS and the home is constructed within the before January 1st, 2010, seller has some requirements that they may need to do some fire prevention improvements to the property, such as fire retardant windows is very common in certain high fire zones. So use form FHDS to let the buyers know of this defensible space disclosure requirement and addendum. Let them know it's going to be a duty they have if they are in a high or very high zone to be in compliance, because later on they start will inspecting and going out in certain cities. Anything else? I'm really done talking about anything. We're already an hour and a half in. Any questions on anything? Make sure
Kelvin,
you-
I have a question.
Yeah.
Yes. What would you advise to investors where one is an experienced investor in building and the other is not? He's more monetary. What do you advise the one that's just applying the money and has no knowledge in a situation? Because as a buyer, they would both be at fault of losing their deposit. So if one claims I had no knowledge, my partner had the knowledge, what would you advise that investor to do on another transaction going forward with the same investor to avoid a situation?
Well, I would advise them that the good thing is, and let's look at liquidated damages really quick. By initialing and assuming both parties initial this box in big bold, I mean, you don't see many boxes in the contract. This is important to read, guys. How many of you guys have read this? Please tell me you all have read it. If
Yes.
buyer fails to complete because of buyer's default, seller shall retain as liquidated damages the deposit actually paid. If the property is a dwelling less than 4 units, then the amount retained shall be no more than 3% of the purchase price. Any excess shall be returned to buyer. Release of funds require mutual signed release instructions after there's an arbitration award, a judicial decision, or a mutual arrangement. And the blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that tells me, well, the good thing, buyer, is there actually is more damage and harm for failing to perform, because it's been quite some time. You've been 4 months in escrow. There's a loss of rent, there's a loss of income, and there's some actions and repairs that the seller performed. So technically speaking, it's such a great thing that you only can lose up to 3% of the purchase price, or whatever in your EMD. Okay. Now, I would tell this buyer who is not an experienced, savvy person that acting ignorant is not going to save you in court. So every buyer, it doesn't matter if you're an experienced investor or you're a first-time home buyer, people expect you to read your contracts, okay? And they especially expect you to read big, bold, boxed areas that you had to actually initial in additional areas. A seller doesn't have to teach you how to read and write and understand. And I gave opportunities to you to ask me questions, explain things, and the blah, 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 blah. From day one, I always told you, you always select who your partners is and have your own arrangements, because I never selected your partner. I didn't give you consultations on what the potential buildability and zoning and maximum usage of this property could be. I've in writing told you this is your buyer's duty to investigate, and especially if everything is removed up front in the beginning, you have a stronger duty to investigate with city and your architect and designer and zoning and knowing what the neighboring lot, what they built too. Those are all instances in which the court treats you and that partner of yours the same. Okay, each of you guys have equal duty and liability and failure of performance. So at the end of the day, if you were the one who put in $20,000 worth of EMD deposit in escrow and that loss is yours, I would rely on your partnership agreement to fall under what is the language specified for how you guys are to treat a loss of income, a loss of deposit, and cancellation of your partnership. Exit.
Bingo, that's it right there. Bingo, thank you.
I would rely
You
on
nailed
that
it. Yeah,
to satisfy who is to be responsible for payment, or if it's shared, or one person is taking all the risk. I don't know what that partnership agreement looks like, but every agreement or partnership should have some sort of clauses in there.
correct.
Please consult with your attorney. And I don't do this in writing. I don't say this verbally. I don't mind saying it verbally after I've said it in writing.
Correct,
Okay.
correct. Thank you, Kelvin.
All right. I hope that answers your question and anyone else's who come to a situation, because I know whenever you buy real estate with a partner, it gets complicated, especially, I mean, family members and husband and wife. I've seen husband and wives who are partners and that break up because of a home purchase. Let's just put it that way. Okay. So yes, I have seen married couples getting disputes and they just say, let's just get divorced now. I don't want to live with you. So I don't want to be with you. So anyway, that's the lot. That sucks. But at the end of the day, the home buying process is supposed to be joyful, fun, and memorable and collaborative. And if it's tearing a partnership or a family apart, I would say don't buy these risky properties. Don't buy for land value. Don't buy fixer-uppers then. Okay, focus on what they can handle and reasonably get good work and consultations on. Okay, because if they're trying to secure a great deal at a great price, that's a land value or fixer-upper, and they're over their head, that's why the acting against broker advice and coming to me and asking for all this protection stuff. I'm so glad our file is bulletproof. Okay, so that's it for today's training. Unless you have any other questions, I will end this with a couple of minutes. If you have any questions on personal stuff or your own transactions.
No, thank you so
Kelvin,
much, Kelvin.
how reliable for the how to say that the information pull it out from the real property details on
Profile
the
report. How reliable is that? That will be relied as the county data. Just stated as that. Those are the county assessors' data recorded from their records.
But for
how
the
reliable is it? I'll say it's very is unreliable is my answer to you if you want to ask me that. So there's many times that the assessors and county data will not have the appropriate exact square footage of the dimensions of a property. There's a lot of changes that have been grandfathered in a long time ago. So there could be lots of permits and different things that are not recorded. Even if you look at the real AVM, the average valuation model provided by Realist Profile, that range is like 400, 500 grand. So I think that's not a reliable source to approximate or to rely on for my own purposes. I rely on experience, agents, brokers, local knowledge. That's what I rely on.
Yeah, right now, nowadays, very problem like the LA assessor office. If we want to check the property as a buyer side, they need the owner, the owner to sign, the seller, that means the seller to sign the authorization form for us to go and check it out. So that will be really cost the seller very easy to get upset. Yeah.
Then build it into your contract up front. If I'm going to a property and I know there's an illegal area or there's an unpermitted room or an enclosed patio or a converted garage or an added on workshop, I would build it in my contract, and you already know that there's going to be a difficulty to sign, then I would say within 3 days, or you check off the box right here. I'll tell you where. All right, here we go.
Where?
Boom. Other terms. I would
Oh,
write in here. In the event the assessor's office requires seller signature to pull permits and plans, seller agrees to sign the addendum from the county that within, agrees to sign within 48 hours of a receipt, the signed request form, so that buyer may fully conduct own investigations on the property regarding plan size, square footage, and talking with the county.
I see. Got it.
Put it right there.
Yeah, sure.
And-
Okay,
and then
thank
I
you.
phrased it nicely. I said, in the event the county requires and asks for the signatures or the approval of the seller to do this. If they don't
Yeah.
ask for it, because not all counties require signatures from the seller, then
No,
this is-
the one in El Monte and the one in LA, I tried, I have experience before they need it.
then
That's
you
the
write in
problem.
the event city/county.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Okay,
So you
Sure.
built yourself the seller's performance item that they have to go and sign that form that you went and got and said, here, I got it. Here's the form, 2 days delivery time. And if they fail to sign it back to you, you
Mhm.
have a valid reason to extend your due diligence period, because you could send them a notice to perform for that
Mhm.
contractual item, paragraph R, 3R.
I see.
Got it?
Mhm. Got it,
Boom.
sure.
Great. These
Nowadays,
are great questions.
much headache.
I'm giving you guys so many weapons to make you guys overcome a lot of experience issues that people don't have.
You know, I know that's why I like your training, but also if we put so much, our accept offer rate will be lower.
My training is
Right.
good, but the only time it's going to be great is when you guys talk and share with me the questions that you guys are experiencing, because that's how you learn when on the
Yeah.
field, and you can learn from other people's mistakes or other issues that from other agents that are going on that's causing them roadblocks or obstacles. That's why you
Mhm.
keep attending my training, because but I need you guys to talk. If you guys stay quiet, like you guys in the beginning half of the session, I can just teach off of what I'm showing you. Okay. When you collaborate, when you share, I'm much more resourceful to you. Thank you all for
Uh-huh.
being here.
Yeah.
That's it for today. I got another meeting and I'd love to see you guys
Okay.
next time.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you so much. Thank you.
All right.
I
Take care.
enjoy your training. It's great.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.